Duke Frederick tore the mourning veil from his wife's hands and ordered the guards to remove her from their daughter's funeral. Before the assembled tenants, servants, and parish elders, he accused Duchess Lydia of poisoning 8-year-old Sophia with one of her herbal medicines. The chapel became so quiet that Lydia heard the black lace rip between Frederick's fingers. "My daughter died because you treated her like another experiment," he said. His voice was controlled, but the hand crushing the veil trembled. "You will not stand beside her coffin and pretend to mourn." Lydia stared at the small white coffin resting before the altar. 6 silver handles shone beneath the candles. A wreath of winter roses covered its lid, concealing nearly half its length. It was too small to contain everything Sophia had been, the child who collected feathers in her pockets, who laughed whenever the old chapel organ wheezed, who insisted that every medicinal plant deserved a proper name. And it was far too light. Lydia had watched 4 footmen carry it inside. None had strained. The youngest had supported his corner with one hand while opening the chapel door with the other. "Let me see her," Lydia said. Frederick's expression hardened. "You have seen enough." "I have not seen her since Tuesday evening." A murmur passed through the pews. Frederick glanced toward his widowed sister, Lady Agatha, who stood in the front row, wearing immaculate black silk. Agatha lowered her eyes at precisely the right moment, presenting grief without surrendering control. "You were barred from the nursery for Sophia's protection," she said gently. "You barred me after you claimed my remedy had harmed her. I watched you pour it into her cup. You watched me give her willow bark water for a fever, and 3 hours later she began convulsing." Lydia turned toward the tenants who had once brought their children to her infirmary. Some avoided her gaze, others looked frightened. They had trusted her through infected wounds, difficult births, and winter illnesses. Now Frederick had reduced years of work to one public accusation. 2 guards approached. Lydia did not resist, not yet. She could not leave Blackthorn Hall while Sophia's medical notes remained locked in Frederick's study. Nor could she abandon the 3 children still recovering in the estate infirmary. One suffered from a lung infection, another had been badly burned at the dye works. The third, a stable boy named Thomas, required a dressing Lydia alone knew how to prepare. Frederick had closed the infirmary that morning. Lady Agatha would now control its medicines, its accounts, and every patient inside. As the guards reached for Lydia's arms, the pallbearers bent to lift the coffin. A strip of blue appeared beneath the nearest silver handle. Lydia stopped breathing. 4 uneven stars had been embroidered into the ribbon with pale yellow thread. She had sewn them herself inside Sophia's favorite nightdress after the child complained that fashionable clothes contained nothing secret. No undertaker knew that ribbon existed. No servant should have removed it. Lydia stepped toward the coffin. "Stop her," Frederick ordered. A guard caught her wrist, but Lydia twisted free and seized the blue strip. It did not come from beneath the lid. It had been knotted around the handle, deliberately positioned where she would see it. Someone had left her a message. "Where did you obtain this?" she demanded. The undertaker recoiled. It was already tied there when His Grace's men delivered the coffin. Frederick's face changed, not with recognition, but with alarm. "Take her away. Open it," Lydia said. "This is neither the time nor place." "It is exactly the place. Open our daughter's coffin." Several tenants raised their heads. Frederick noticed them watching and lowered his voice. "You will not turn Sophia's burial into a spectacle merely to save your reputation. My reputation can wait. Open the coffin." Agatha moved between them. Her perfume carried the sweet, heavy scent of poppies. Lydia knew that smell. She had detected the same scent on Sophia's pillow when the child first became ill. "Grief has confused you," Agatha whispered. "Do not force Frederick to have you confined." The threat was softly spoken, but entirely real. With Frederick's testimony and a physician willing to support him, Lydia could be sent to a private asylum before nightfall. Then every record bearing her name could disappear. The chapel doors suddenly crashed open. Sophia's nurse stumbled across the threshold. Mary's cap was missing, her uniform was torn, and blood darkened one sleeve. In her arms lay a mud-stained blanket. Frederick went rigid. Agatha's face lost all color. Mary took 2 unsteady steps before collapsing against a pew. "My lady," she gasped, looking only at Lydia. "They buried the wrong child." A woman screamed. The pallbearers nearly dropped the coffin. Then, beneath the confusion, Lydia heard something impossible. A faint cough rose from below the chapel floor. It came again, small, muffled, and unmistakably human. "Sophia," Lydia whispered. Lady Agatha turned toward the side door and ran. Lady Agatha reached the side passage before anyone moved to stop her. Lydia saw black silk disappear through the narrow doorway connecting the chapel to the old family vault. She started after her, but another weak cough rose beneath the choir stalls. It was not Sophia's voice. Lydia understood that now. But someone, perhaps a child, was alive beneath the chapel floor. "Move those stalls," she ordered. Frederick caught her arm. "My sister is escaping, and whoever she imprisoned is still here." His grip loosened. The rector and 2 footmen dragged the wooden stalls away from the northern wall. Beneath them lay a square stone fitted with an iron ring. The entrance had once led to the oldest burial passage, abandoned after part of the vault flooded. 3 men were needed to raise it. Stale air rose from the darkness, carrying damp earth, candle wax, and the sweet medicinal odor Lydia had noticed on Sophia's pillow. She took a candle and descended. Frederick followed her, then the rector and 2 servants. At the bottom of the steps they found a narrow passage lined with sealed burial niches. A weak scraping came from behind a wooden storage door. Lydia lifted the latch. A boy collapsed into her arms. He was Edward Pike, the 14-year-old apprentice whose father had made the coffin. His wrists were bound, and a strip of linen had been forced between his teeth. Lydia removed the gag and checked his breathing. "You are safe," she said. "Tell me who did this." Edward looked past her at Frederick and recoiled. The men wore blackthorn livery. Frederick's face hardened. "On whose orders?" "I heard them say Lady Agatha's name." Lydia cut the cords around Edward's wrists. "Did you tie the blue ribbon to the coffin?" The boy nodded. His father had delivered the coffin to Blackthorn the previous evening. They had been ordered to leave it in the chapel and depart without preparing the body. An unusual instruction, but one carrying the Duke's seal. Edward had remained behind because he had forgotten his measuring cord. Through the vestry door, he saw Agatha and Dr. Crane bring in a small body wrapped in sacking. It was not Sophia. The dead child wore a coarse gray shift and had dark hair. "Then Lady Agatha brought your daughter's nightdress," Edward continued. "She cut the ribbon from inside it and told the doctor to dress the other girl." Lydia struggled to keep her voice steady. "Where was Sophia?" "I saw a carriage waiting by the servants' entrance. Nurse Mary was inside, holding a sleeping child. I thought she was helping them until I heard her shouting." Edward had taken the discarded piece of ribbon after Agatha left. He tied it to the coffin handle, hoping Lydia would recognize it. Before he could leave the chapel, 2 men caught him and locked him beneath the floor. "You tried to warn me," Lydia said. "I did not know who else would believe me." Frederick looked away. Lydia helped Edward back into the chapel. Mary was conscious now, seated beside a pew, while a maid bandaged the cut on her arm. "Where is Sophia?" Lydia asked. Mary's eyes filled with tears. "Lady Agatha said Dr. Crane was taking her to a specialist in York. She showed me an order bearing His Grace's signature." Frederick stepped forward. "I signed no order to remove my daughter." "You signed a medical authorization yesterday," Mary said. Lady Agatha added the destination afterward. Frederick's expression changed. He remembered the paper. Agatha had placed it before him while he sat outside Sophia's room, telling him it would allow Crane to obtain whatever treatment the child required. Frederick had signed without reading beyond the first paragraph. "Was Sophia conscious?" Lydia asked. "Only briefly. She called for you." Mary looked directly at Frederick. She asked why her father would not let her mother come. The words struck harder than an accusation. Mary had tried to stop the carriage at the east gate. The driver struck her and pushed her onto the road. She followed on foot until the carriage disappeared toward the river. Lydia rose and faced the coffin. "Open it." Frederick did not object this time. The undertaker's assistant removed the wreath of winter roses and loosened the screws. The assembled tenants watched in complete silence. When the lid was lifted, a little girl lay inside wearing Sophia's white nightdress. Powder had been spread across her face, and pale curls had been arranged over her natural dark hair. Frederick staggered back. Lydia approached alone. She removed the false curls and recognized the child beneath them. Alice Bell. 3 months earlier, Lydia had treated Alice for a burn on her wrist. Soon afterward, Agatha reported that Alice and her widowed mother had left Blackthorn to live with relatives. Lydia had never believed it. She examined Alice without pretending that certainty could be found from a glance. There were no marks of violence on the child's throat or hands. Her pupils were unusually small, however, and the heavy sweetness clinging to her hair matched the medicine used in Sophia's nursery. Someone had given Alice a powerful sleeping draught. Whether it had been carelessness or murder would require an independent examination. Lydia covered the child's face. "Her name is Alice Bell," she said, loud enough for everyone in the chapel to hear. "She will not be buried as someone else's daughter." Mary began to cry. Frederick stared at the open coffin. Why would Agatha do this? "To make the world believe Sophia was dead," Lydia answered, "and to make certain I was blamed before anyone examined the body." Edward reached inside his torn coat and removed a folded scrap of paper. "I took this from the doctor's case before they caught me." It was a payment receipt from Sophia's inheritance trust. The sum was far larger than any physician's fee. Beneath it appeared a second payment made in Alice Bell's name. Both had been authorized by Lady Agatha. At the bottom of the page, Dr. Crane had written an instruction. The Bell child must be prepared before the funeral. Lady Sophia is to remain asleep until she reaches the river house. Lydia folded the receipt and placed it inside her sleeve. Sophia was alive, but the false funeral had never been Agatha's final act. It had been meant to give her enough time to make Lydia a murderer and Sophia disappear. Frederick ordered the chapel doors closed. No servant, mourner, or tenant would leave until every person who had helped prepare the false funeral had been questioned. He sent riders to the east gate and the river road, then instructed the rector to remain with Alice Bell's body until an independent physician could examine her. Lydia watched him issue the commands. An hour earlier, Frederick had used the same authority to remove her from her daughter's funeral. Now he was trying to undo the consequences with louder orders. It was not enough. But Sophia was still missing, and Lydia could not afford to refuse useful help. Mary remembered that the carriage had turned south after leaving the estate. That road did not lead to York. It followed the river toward a series of abandoned mills and private houses once used by wealthy patients seeking isolation. Edward provided another detail. The carriage had a broken left lamp, he said. The glass was red, not clear. Frederick sent men to search the main road. Lydia, Mary, Edward, and 2 trusted servants followed the older river path, where a carriage could travel unseen behind the trees. Rain had softened the ground. Fresh wheel tracks appeared beside the hedge, deeper on one side where the road sloped toward the water. After nearly 2 miles, they found the broken lamp. Red glass lay scattered near a narrow turning. Beyond it stood an abandoned toll house with one shutter hanging loose. The carriage was gone, but muddy tracks crossed the yard. Lydia entered first. Inside, a chair had been placed beside the cold fireplace. A length of cord lay on the floor, along with a child's traveling cloak, Sophia's cloak. Mary pressed it to her face. She was here. Lydia examined the room. A cup stood on the windowsill, its bottom stained with a dark residue. She did not touch it. "Wrap that in cloth," she told one of the servants. "It may be compared with the medicine found beside Alice." Near the chair, she discovered several drops of candle wax and a small brass bell. Sophia carried the bell when illness made her voice too weak to reach the servants outside her room. Lydia picked it up. The handle was still warm. They left recently. Frederick crossed the room and opened the rear door. Wheel tracks continued toward the river, but a second set returned to the main road. "They changed carriages," he said. Lydia noticed a strip of paper beneath the overturned chair. It had been torn from the medical authorization Frederick had signed. Only the lower half remained. His signature appeared at the bottom. Above it, in a different hand, someone had added, "The patient is to remain under Dr. Crane's sole authority. Neither parent is to be admitted without his written consent." Frederick read the sentence twice. "That was not there when I signed it. You left blank space above your name," Lydia said. "Agatha said the details would be completed after Crane selected a physician, and you trusted her to decide who could reach our daughter." He looked at Sophia's cloak. "I believed I was authorizing treatment. You believed what required the least resistance from you." Frederick folded the paper, but Lydia took it from his hand. "No, you will not hide this because it shames you. I was not trying to hide it. You burned my report when it shamed your sister. I will keep every document from now on." He released the paper. Mary searched the cloak and found a tear in its inner lining. Sophia had hidden something inside, a small piece of writing paper folded around a sprig of dried rosemary. The message contained only 6 words. "Mama, I am alive. River House." The handwriting was uneven, but it was Sophia's. "She knew you would find the cloak," Mary said. Lydia pressed the note against her chest for one brief moment. Then she placed it safely beside the receipt from Crane's case. Frederick walked to the window. "There are 4 houses along this part of the river." 3, Edward corrected. "The northern house lost its roof last winter. The boy had traveled the road with his father while delivering coffins to neighboring parishes. Of the remaining properties, one belonged to an elderly magistrate, and another had been empty for years. The third was a private convalescent house leased by Dr. Crane. Frederick immediately called for the horses. Before they could leave, one of his riders arrived carrying news from Blackthorn. Agatha's rooms had been searched. Her clothes and jewelry remained untouched. The account books from Sophia's trust were gone, so were Lydia's medical notes concerning Alice Bell. "She did not run because she feared discovery," Lydia said. She ran because the plan is not finished. The writer also brought a parish record recovered from Agatha's desk. It stated that Alice and her mother, Hannah Bell, had departed Blackthorn 3 months earlier. But the rector's signature had been imitated poorly. The real rector stood in the toll house and denied ever seeing the document. On its reverse, someone had written an address near the old ferry crossing. "Hannah may still be alive," Lydia said, "and if she knows what happened to Alice," Mary replied, "Agatha may be searching for her too." A sound came from the yard. Edward hurried to the window. A woman stood beyond the broken gate, soaked by rain and struggling to remain upright. One side of her face was bruised. In her hand, she held a small shoe Lydia recognized from Alice's last visit to the infirmary. "Hannah Bell," Lydia whispered. The woman looked toward the traveling cloak in Mary's arms. "You are searching for the little Duchess," she said. Lydia stepped outside. "Do you know where Dr. Crane took her?" Hannah nodded. "I know the house. I know why your daughter was chosen, and I know why my Alice had to die." She looked past Lydia at Frederick. "But I will not speak while the man who signed away my child is standing beside you." Frederick stepped away from the toll house. He remained close enough to protect them, but far enough that Hannah could speak without him standing over her. Lydia brought Hannah inside and wrapped a dry cloak around her shoulders. "Tell me what happened to Alice." Hannah stared at the small shoe in her hands. "Lady Agatha offered to pay for her treatment. Dr. Crane said Alice's burn had poisoned her blood, though she was still walking and speaking when they took her. Hannah had been permitted to visit the river house once. Alice was weak, confused, and could barely keep her eyes open. The following morning, Crane announced that she had died during the night. He would not let me see her body. Hannah said, Lady Agatha gave me money and a paper saying I had agreed to leave Blackthorn. When I refused to sign, her men threatened to have me declared unfit and send me to an asylum. Why did they keep Alice's body? Lydia asked. I did not know they had. Hannah's voice broke. Not until you opened that coffin. Lydia took her hand. Alice will be examined by an independent physician. She will be buried beneath her own name. Hannah closed her eyes, absorbing the promise. Then she removed several folded pages from inside her coat. Months earlier, Agatha had asked Hannah to clean the rooms at the river house. While searching for Alice's medical record, Hannah found copies of payments made from Sophia's inheritance trust. Agatha had been withdrawing money for nearly 2 years. Some payments were disguised as medical expenses. Others had been transferred to creditors connected to her late husband's failed shipping business. She told Crane the account would be inspected before Lady Sophia's next birthday, Hannah said. If anyone saw how much was missing, she would lose everything. The plan was now clear. Crane would make Sophia appear gravely ill, then move her to the river house under the authorization Frederick had signed. Alice's body would be dressed in Sophia's clothes and buried before Lydia could examine it. With Sophia declared dead and Lydia accused of poisoning her, Agatha could conceal the missing money and destroy the person most likely to expose the fraud. What were they planning to do with Sophia afterward? Frederick asked from the doorway. Hannah looked at him with undisguised contempt. Crane said the child would remain asleep until they decided whether she could be sent abroad. Lady Agatha said no one would search for a girl who had already been buried. Lydia rose. How long ago did they leave the toll house? Less than an hour. Then we still have time. Hannah drew a rough map on the back of Frederick's false authorization. The river house stood beyond a narrow stone bridge. Woods surrounded 3 sides, and the river blocked the 4th. There was only one carriage road. Frederick called his servants forward. I will take the road and prevent anyone from leaving. Lydia and Mary can approach through the old kitchen path. Lydia studied him. You will not enter until I have Sophia. If Crane sees my men, he may harm her. It was the first decision Frederick had made that placed Sophia's safety above his authority. Lydia gave him a single nod. Hannah caught her sleeve before she left. Crane keeps his medicines in a locked cabinet beside the treatment room. If Sophia is unconscious, the record of what he gave her should be there. Lydia handed the financial pages to the rector. Take Hannah and Edward back to Blackthorn. Keep these documents with you and allow no one connected to Agatha near Alice's body. Then Lydia, Mary, and one trusted servant followed the river path. Dusk had settled by the time the house appeared through the trees. No lamps burned in the lower windows. Upstairs, behind a half-closed curtain, Lydia saw a small figure lying motionless on a bed. A woman in black stood beside her. Agatha lifted a medicine glass toward Sophia's lips. Lydia entered through the kitchen door, while Mary and the servant searched the ground floor. Upstairs, Agatha still stood beside Sophia's bed, holding the medicine glass. Step away from her, Lydia said. Agatha turned without surprise. You should have accepted the funeral. She tipped the glass toward Sophia's lips. Lydia crossed the room and struck it from her hand. It shattered against the wall, releasing the same heavy sweetness that had clung to Alice's hair. Sophia lay pale and motionless. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. Lydia turned the child onto her side, loosened her collar, and cleared the residue from her mouth. She kept Sophia warm and spoke to her continuously, watching every breath. Mama is here. You do not have to be afraid. Sophia's eyelids moved. Agatha backed toward the door, but Mary appeared there. Dr. Crane is trying to leave, she said. From below came the sound of a carriage starting. Agatha ran downstairs. Lydia remained with Sophia. Mary searched the room and found Crane's locked medicine cabinet. The servant forced it open. Inside were labeled bottles, Sophia's treatment record, and a second book containing Alice Bell's name. Alice's final entry recorded repeated doses of laudanum despite her worsening breathing. The last dose was twice the amount written on the previous page. Beside it, Crane had noted, "Patient deceased. Body retained by order of Lady Agatha." Sophia's record showed the same medicine, given in smaller doses throughout the day. A final dose had been prepared for that evening. Mary carried both books downstairs. Outside, Dr. Crane climbed into the waiting carriage. Agatha followed and ordered the driver forward. The carriage reached the stone bridge before Frederick and his men blocked the road. Crane jumped down and attempted to escape through the trees. 2 servants caught him before he reached the river. Agatha remained inside. When Frederick opened the carriage door, she looked at him as though he were still the brother who had defended her against every accusation. "Lydia has turned you against your own blood," she said. "If this becomes public, they will blame you too. Your signature is on the order." "Your money paid Crane. You accused your wife before the entire estate." Frederick said nothing. Agatha reached for his hand. "Let me leave. We can say Crane acted alone. Sophia is alive. No lasting harm has been done." Frederick looked toward the upper window of the river house. "Daughter was placed in another child's coffin while I called her mother a murderer. You were grieving. I was proud," he replied, "and you knew how easily my pride could be used." He ordered his men to detain her. Upstairs, Sophia finally opened her eyes. "Mama?" Lydia bent over her. "I am here. Aunt Agatha said you gave me the medicine." "No, she lied to you." Sophia's fingers closed weakly around Lydia's hand. Papa believed her. Lydia could not deny it. Frederick entered a few minutes later, but stopped at the doorway. He did not approach the bed. Sophia looked at him without speaking. Mary placed Crane's records on the table between Lydia and Frederick. "These prove what happened to Alice and Sophia," she said, "but they also show whose authority allowed Crane to take the child from Blackthorn." Frederick stared at his signature on the first page. "I will take these to the magistrate myself." Lydia lifted Sophia into her arms. "You will take them," she said, "and you will tell him everything, including what I warned you about before you burned my report." Frederick understood the price. If he told the truth, Agatha and Crane would be exposed. So would he. Sophia was taken back to Blackthorn under Lydia's care. An independent physician from the neighboring town examined her before any further medicine was given. He confirmed that she had been repeatedly sedated and warned that her recovery would take time. She was weak, but she would live. Agatha and Dr. Crane were held separately under the magistrate's authority. Neither had yet been charged. Their guilt would have to be established through testimony, medical records, and the missing accounts from Sophia's trust. By morning, Frederick sat in his study with the magistrate, the rector, and 2 witnesses. On the desk lay Crane's treatment books, Hannah's copied accounts, the false transfer order, and Lydia's surviving notes about Alice. Frederick placed his original accusation against Lydia beside them. "I made this statement before examining the body," he said. "I relied upon Dr. Crane and Lady Agatha, although my wife had already warned me that both the medical records and trust accounts contained irregularities." The magistrate studied him. "Did you authorize your daughter's removal?" "I signed a medical authorization without reading the completed terms." "Did Duchess Lydia ask you to investigate Lady Agatha's management of the trust?" "Yes." "What did you do with her report?" Frederick looked toward Lydia. "I burned it." The admission threatened his reputation, his political appointments, and possibly his authority over Sophia's inheritance. He made it anyway. Lydia felt no gratitude. Truth given only after disaster was not courage. It was a debt long overdue. Agatha was brought in later that morning. She denied ordering Alice's body placed in the coffin and claimed Crane had acted without her knowledge. "The accounts were managed by clerks," she said. "Any missing funds are Frederick's responsibility. He signed every authorization." Crane offered the opposite defense. He claimed Agatha had ordered every dose and threatened to ruin him if he refused. Their statements contradicted each other, but the evidence was not yet complete. The original trust ledgers were still missing. Without them, Hannah's copied pages showed suspicious payments, but could not prove the full amount Agatha had taken. Alice's treatment record established Crane's actions, yet Agatha's role in the child's death still depended upon witnesses. The magistrate ordered both prisoners held while the River House and Agatha's rooms were searched again. A formal public hearing would follow once Sophia was strong enough to provide a statement. After the questioning, Frederick returned to the nursery. Sophia was awake, sitting against Lydia's shoulder. She looked frightened when he entered. He stopped immediately. "May I come closer?" he asked. Sophia did not answer. Frederick remained at the door. "I am sorry," he said. "I believed Aunt Agatha when I should have listened to you and your mother." Sophia pressed her face into Lydia's sleeve. Frederick did not ask to be forgiven. He quietly left the room. That evening, Lydia found him in the chapel beside Alice's open coffin. The false curls and Sophia's nightdress had been removed. Alice now wore the simple gray dress in which Edward had first seen her. "Hannah has chosen a proper burial gown," Lydia said. "Alice will be buried under her own name." Frederick nodded. "I will pay for everything. Money is not an apology." "I know." Lydia looked toward the place where he had torn the mourning veil from her hands. You did not merely believe a lie, you made it public before you knew whether our daughter was truly dead. I cannot undo it, no, but you will correct it before the same people who heard it." Frederick understood. At the coming hearing, he would have to confess that Lydia had warned him, that he destroyed her evidence, and that his unread signature allowed Sophia to be taken. Before he could answer, Edward entered carrying a locked metal box found beneath a loose floorboard in Agatha's room. The magistrate opened it in front of them. Inside lay several missing pages from Sophia's trust ledger. On the top page was a payment to Dr. Crane dated 2 days before Alice died. Its description contained only 4 words: "Body reserved for substitution." The public hearing began 3 weeks later in the county assembly hall. By then, Sophia could walk short distances, though she still tired easily. Lydia refused to let her attend until the magistrate agreed that the child would answer questions only once, and that neither Agatha nor Crane could approach her. Reporters filled the rear benches. Blackthorn's tenants occupied the gallery, including many who had watched Frederick remove Lydia from the funeral. Alice's death was examined first. 2 independent physicians had reviewed her body and Crane's records. They could not determine the exact moment she received the fatal dose, but they agreed that her death was consistent with excessive laudanum, not the infection Crane had recorded. Crane denied deliberately harming her. "I treated a dangerously ill child with the methods available to me," he said. "Lady Agatha later took control of the body without my consent," Edward testified next. He described seeing Crane and Agatha bring Alice's body into the chapel, dress her in Sophia's nightclothes, and arrange false curls around her face. "Why did you not seek the Duke immediately?" Crane's solicitor asked. Edward looked toward Frederick. "Lady Agatha's men wore his livery. The Coffin order carried his seal. I did not know whether his grace was part of it." The answer spread unease through the hall. Mary then described Sophia's removal from Blackthorn. She produced the medical authorization Frederick had signed and the extra conditions added above his name. "I heard Lady Agatha tell the driver that Duchess Lydia must not see the child again," Mary said. "When I tried to stop the carriage, I was struck and left beside the road." Agatha claimed Mary was lying to protect her mistress. Then Hannah Bell took the witness chair. She identified Alice's medical record, the payments she had copied from Sophia's trust, and the document Agatha had tried to force her to sign after Alice disappeared. "You accepted money from Lady Agatha," the solicitor said. "Yes," Hannah replied. "I was frightened and poor. Neither condition made my daughter less dead." No one challenged her again. The magistrate placed the recovered trust pages beside Hannah's copies. The amounts, dates, and account numbers matched. Payments had been made to Agatha's creditors and disguised as medical expenses for Sophia. One entry authorized money for Crane shortly before Alice's death. Another paid for the false funeral. Agatha insisted that Frederick had approved every transaction. The magistrate turned to him. "Did you?" Frederick stood before the same tenants who had heard him accuse Lydia. "My signature appears on several documents," he said. "Some were incomplete when I signed them. Others were placed among ordinary estate papers. But I will not pretend that deception removes my responsibility." Agatha stared at him. Frederick continued. "My wife warned me that the trust accounts did not balance. I dismissed her because I believed questioning my sister insulted my family. Lydia prepared a written report. I burned it." A murmur moved through the gallery. "I also accused Lydia of poisoning Sophia before I examined the body or requested an independent medical opinion. I denied her access to our daughter, closed her infirmary, and allowed Lady Agatha to control the medicines." Each admission weakened his authority and strengthened the case against his sister. Agatha rose. "You are destroying us both for a woman who will never forgive you." Frederick looked at Lydia. "That is not why I am telling the truth." Sophia was brought forward last. Lydia remained beside her, but did not answer for her. Sophia described waking in the carriage and hearing Agatha say the funeral had already begun. At the river house, Crane gave her medicine whenever she asked for her mother. Aunt Agatha said Mama would be taken away, Sophia said. She said Papa had signed the paper, so no one could stop her. The magistrate asked whether anyone had told Sophia what to say. "No. How can you be certain the woman was Lady Agatha?" Sophia looked directly at her aunt. "Because she wore the same poppy perfume she wore beside my bed." Agatha's composure finally broke. "That proves nothing. A child's memory is not evidence of murder." "No," Lydia said, "but Crane's records, the altered authorization, the trust payments, Edward's testimony, Mary's injuries, and Alice's body are." The magistrate ordered a short recess before hearing Crane and Agatha's final statements. As the guards led Crane away, he stopped beside Agatha. "You promised the child would only be hidden," he said. Agatha turned pale. Crane faced the magistrate. "I will give a complete statement," he said, "but only if the court records who ordered me to preserve Alice Bell's body for the coffin." When the hearing resumed, Dr. Crane returned without Agatha. He admitted that Alice had not been dying when she entered the river house. She suffered from pain and fever, but Lydia's earlier treatment had been helping. Agatha paid Crane to keep the child sedated until Hannah agreed to leave Blackthorn. "I gave Alice too much laudanum," Crane said. "By the time I understood she had stopped breathing, it was too late." He had wanted to report the death. Agatha refused. Sophia's trust was due for inspection before the child's next birthday. If the missing money were discovered, Agatha would lose her income and could face prosecution for fraud. Alice's death gave her another solution. She said the girls were similar enough in height, Crane continued. The coffin would remain closed. Lady Sophia would be hidden at the river house, and Duchess Lydia would be blamed for poisoning her. Agatha intended to keep Sophia sedated until Lydia had been arrested and the funeral completed. Afterward, the child would be sent abroad under another name. The magistrate asked what would have happened if Sophia became too ill to travel. Crane lowered his eyes. Lady Agatha said one dead child had already solved part of the problem. A silence settled over the hall. Crane's testimony alone might have been dismissed as an attempt to reduce his own punishment, but each part was supported by evidence already presented. His treatment book documented Alice's fatal dose. The trust pages recorded Agatha's payments to him. Edward had seen them place Alice in Sophia's coffin. Mary had witnessed Sophia's removal. Hannah's copied accounts matched the original pages recovered from Agatha's room. Sophia had been found alive in Crane's river house under an altered authorization bearing Frederick's signature. Agatha was brought back before the magistrate. She continued to deny ordering Alice's death. "I told Crane to keep the girl quiet," she said. "I did not tell him to kill her. But after she died, you used her body," Lydia replied. Agatha looked toward Frederick. "You know what it is to make one terrible decision and then discover there is no safe way back." Frederick did not rescue her. "I know what it is to choose pride over truth," he said. "That does not make your choices mine." "No," Lydia said, "but your choices protected hers." The magistrate called the room to order. He ruled that sufficient evidence existed to send Crane to trial for Alice's death, the drugging of Sophia, and falsifying medical records. Agatha would stand trial for fraud, abduction, conspiracy, and her role in concealing Alice's death and substituting her body. The financial charges would require a longer investigation. Until then, Agatha's control over the trust and every Blackthorn account was suspended. The magistrate then addressed Lydia. "No evidence supports the accusation that you poisoned your daughter. The statement against you is formally withdrawn." Reporters began writing. Lydia remained standing. "With respect, a sentence spoken in this room is not enough." The magistrate frowned. "You have been cleared. I was accused before my tenants, my patients, my servants, and beside the coffin of a child buried under my daughter's name. Frederick closed my infirmary before anyone examined Sophia. Those actions cannot be corrected quietly." She looked toward the gallery. Every person who heard the lie must be allowed to hear the truth. The magistrate agreed that the findings would be published and read publicly at Blackthorn. The closure of Lydia's infirmary would also be reviewed, along with her right to operate it independently of Frederick's household authority. Outside the hall, Frederick approached her. "I will restore the infirmary immediately. You cannot restore what you still control. Then I will surrender control." Lydia studied him. "You should do that because it is right, not because you believe it will bring me back." Frederick accepted the distinction. "I know." He offered to place the infirmary, Lydia's income, and Sophia's inheritance under separate legal trusts. He would also repay the money missing from Sophia's accounts until Agatha's assets could be recovered. "These are not gifts," Lydia said. "No, they are debts." Sophia emerged from the hall holding Mary's hand. She did not go to Frederick. She went to her mother. The public reading at Blackthorn was arranged for the day of Alice's true funeral. Frederick would stand before the same chapel where he had torn the mourning veil from Lydia's hands. This time, no one else would speak for him. Alice Bell was buried beneath the northern windows of Blackthorn Chapel. This time, the coffin bore her own name. Hannah walked behind it, holding her daughter's surviving shoe. Lydia and Sophia followed, while Edward carried the blue ribbon that had exposed the false funeral. Frederick stood apart from them. After the burial, the magistrate's findings were read before the tenants, servants, and parish elders. The report confirmed that Alice's body had been substituted for Sophia's and that no evidence supported the accusation against Lydia. Her name was formally cleared. Then Frederick stepped forward. At Sophia's false funeral, he had torn the mourning veil from Lydia's hands and ordered the guards to remove her. Now he stood in the same place without guards, title, or anger to protect him. "I accused my wife of murdering our daughter before I had even looked inside the coffin," he said. The chapel became silent. "Lydia warned me that Sophia's trust accounts contained irregularities. She questioned Dr. Crane's treatment and Lady Agatha's authority over the nursery. I answered her evidence with pride. I burned her report, closed her infirmary, and signed an authorization I had not fully read." He looked toward the tenants who had once trusted Lydia with their children. "My sister deceived me, but deception does not excuse the choices I made. I believed her because she told me what preserved my authority. I rejected Lydia because the truth required me to admit I was wrong." Frederick then signed the documents prepared after the hearing. Sophia's inheritance would be placed under an independent trust managed by Lydia and 2 court-appointed trustees. Frederick could no longer sign withdrawals or medical authorizations on his daughter's behalf without their approval. Lydia's infirmary would also become independent of the estate household. Its property, medicines, and accounts could not be seized or closed by Frederick or any future steward of Blackthorn. He transferred enough of his personal income to replace the money missing from Sophia's trust, while the court pursued Agatha's assets. None of these actions reduced the charges against his sister. None protected his reputation, and none required Lydia to forgive him. When the documents had been witnessed, Frederick addressed her directly. "I cannot ask you to remain my wife, because I have corrected only a fraction of what I destroyed." From inside his coat, he removed a final document. It granted Lydia a separate residence, control of her income, and primary care of Sophia. Frederick would visit their daughter only with Lydia's consent, and only when Sophia felt safe. He had already signed it. "If you choose separation," he said, "I will not oppose you." Sophia reached for Lydia's hand. Frederick did not ask the child to come to him. Hannah placed Alice's shoe upon the grave. Edward tied the blue ribbon around the temporary wooden marker beneath the child's carved name. The crowd slowly left the chapel grounds. Frederick remained beside the path until Lydia approached. "Do you expect this confession to restore what we were?" she asked. "No." "Do you expect me to believe you have changed?" "No, not yet." His answer surprised her. "I expect my future actions to be judged without asking you to forget my past ones," he said. "If you never forgive me, the debts remain mine to pay." For the first time, Frederick placed the decision entirely in Lydia's hands. She looked toward Sophia, then toward Alice's grave. "I will not decide my future while standing inside the ruin you created." Frederick lowered his head. Lydia took the unsigned separation agreement and left with her daughter. Behind them, the chapel bell began to ring. Frederick did not follow. The trials concluded 8 months later. Dr. Crane was convicted of causing Alice's death through the unlawful administration of laudanum, falsifying medical records, and helping to drug and abduct Sophia. Agatha was convicted of fraud, conspiracy, abduction, and concealing Alice's death. The court found that she had taken money from Sophia's trust to pay the debts left by her late husband, then constructed the false funeral to prevent the missing funds from being discovered. Some of the stolen money was recovered from her property. Frederick replaced the remainder from his personal estate. His payment did not erase his responsibility. It acknowledged it. By then, Lydia had signed the separation agreement. She and Sophia moved into a smaller house near the reopened infirmary. Lydia controlled her own income, chose her own staff, and answered to an independent board that included Hannah Bell and 2 elected representatives of the tenant families. Frederick held no position there. Hannah became an advocate for patients whose families could not read medical contracts or afford legal assistance. Mary supervised the children's ward. Edward left the undertaker's trade and began an apprenticeship with the estate carpenter. Above the infirmary desk stood a simple wooden plaque. "No patient shall be treated without a recorded name, an examined history, and the knowledge of those entrusted with their care." Sophia recovered slowly. For several months, she refused to sleep without her brass bell beside the bed. The scent of poppies frightened her, and she would not enter the chapel unless Lydia held her hand. Frederick visited only when Sophia agreed. At first, she allowed him to sit with her in the infirmary garden for 10 minutes. He did not bring gifts or ask her to call him Papa. He answered her questions, even when they shamed him. "Why did you believe Aunt Agatha?" Sophia asked during one visit. "Because she agreed with me," he said. "Your mother asked me to admit I might be wrong." "Will you believe Mama next time?" Frederick looked toward Lydia. "I will examine the truth before deciding whom I believe. That is what I should have done before." Sophia accepted the answer without offering forgiveness. Frederick continued to fulfill every term of the separation. He read every document placed before him, resigned from the political positions that had benefited from his silence, and permitted the published findings to remain attached to Blackthorn's estate records. He never asked Lydia to return. One afternoon, she found him beside Alice's grave, replacing a rosemary plant damaged by winter. "I once thought repentance meant persuading you to forgive me," he said. "Now I understand that it means repairing what I can, even if you never do." Lydia placed Alice's surviving shoe beneath the new stone Hannah had chosen. "You finally understand the difference between remorse and entitlement." Frederick nodded. "Is there any future in which you might trust me again?" "There may be a future in which Sophia trusts you," Lydia said. "That is the relationship you should repair. And us? There is no us to restore. What existed between us allowed you to deny my judgment, control my work, and remove me from our daughter's funeral. I will not return to it." He accepted her answer. Lydia did not hate him, but freedom did not require hatred, and forgiveness did not require reunion. A year after the false funeral, the infirmary opened a new children's room in Alice Bell's name. Sophia arrived carrying a strip of blue ribbon. 4 uneven stars had been embroidered into it with pale yellow thread. "Where should we put it?" she asked. Lydia looked at the patients entering beneath their own names, at Hannah welcoming their families, and at Mary opening windows that would never again be locked by someone else's order. Then she tied the ribbon around the handle of the infirmary door. "Here," she said, "where everyone can see that we survived." Sophia opened the door. Frederick stood outside the garden gate, waiting for his daughter's permission to enter. Lydia followed Sophia inside. She did not look back.